I live in Gibatsev. This is kind of, I don't think I have anything else interesting in my introduction to say. Please interrupt with questions. I like making this a conversation. Everything that I'm including in here is, we don't have to cover everything, so I would love to hear where your brains go. If you have a question, please interrupt me. I would appreciate it. So, slides. So, I am a DBT therapist. I'm a CBT therapist. I use an agenda. My agenda for today is, we're going to introduce our topic. We're going to start with what is DBT, because at the end of today, I would love to know what is DBT in your opinion. How did I get passionate about this topic? I already started hinting at it, but we'll go through the whole thing. And introduction to the therapeutic relationship and why it's important in DBT. And then we're going to go through some specific points in this topic in the power of the relationship. Specifically, we'll go through observing limits, burnout, how to avoid burnout, leveraging the relationship in DBT, effective phone coaching, ruptures as a key to interpersonal effectiveness, and an example, not a case example, but an example of how I'm conceptualizing this. And what does that behavior therapy mean to you in your heart?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Everybody's been talking about dialectics. What on earth is dialectics?
Dialectics. What are dialectics? Excellent question. So dialectics is an ancient philosophy that has four main points to it that I'm not going to go into now. But the main thing you need to know about dialectics, so it is an ancient philosophy, which by the way is one of the reasons I say I think it's important to discuss hashkafa and philosophy as treating religious people. You need to address this, I think, elephant that might not be getting addressed, which is that there's a philosophy underpinning this entire treatment, and it may not be your philosophy, so we should address that. So dialectics, is the idea that main point in summary is there's always multiple truths occurring at any given time, and so there is no absolute truth. So this a little bit conflicts with Judaism. We have an absolute truth, it's called God and Torah. And so that is a little bit at odds with that. The way that I understand this is that God and Torah are absolute truth, and God created a multifaceted and never black and white, never singular world. For example, Hashem is the only one, the only singular thing in existence, and everything outside of God is through duplicity or multiplicity, and that's the dialectics idea. And dialectics underpins all of DBT treatment, because what we're aiming for in DBT, babies are invited and welcome and encouraged to stay and make as much noise as you'd like. So this underpins everything in the whole treatment, because everything is about our ability to synthesize multiple truths, our ability to sit with multiple truths, our ability to exist within the duplicity of the world and not get into black and white, exist in the gray. So that's the gist of what's dialectics. So yeah, any other what is DBT responses?
I want to add on to that, to the question about dialectics. So a client of mine taught me that she was suicidal, and so I said to her, I understand you feel like life isn't worth living, and at the same time you want to do better and you need to do better. So it's like, how could you say to somebody, I understand that you don't want to live anymore, but also you need to do better? It's like holding those opposites, and then it's like that delicate dance and balance between having empathy and really feeling for your client, but also really challenging them. I get it, this is really overwhelming, this is really hard for you, and let's talk about what skills you're going to use. It's holding both.
Yeah, so one of our... What?
Like cognitive dissonance?
What do you mean?
Cognitive dissonance.
I heard, what do you mean by
Right.
that? I was
Because that's what we were talking about when cognitive dissonance, you get two different things fighting with each other.
Right.
Yeah, I think cognizance is I'm not, this thing is dissonant for me. It doesn't fit with my worldview, so I'm kind of block it out. Do this thing instead. But actually, the dialectic that you're referring to is from one of our DBT agreements, or one of the things we agree to in DBT in general, is that everybody, if you exist and you're human and you're alive and breathing, you are doing the best you can. As part of being human is that you're doing the best you can. And if you want to achieve change, if you want something to be different, you've got to be more motivated, try harder, and do better. That's the only way to achieve change, because what you're doing right now is not working. So that you don't have to like that. That's that's just the reality. The reality is that you are doing the best you can, and if you want things to be different, you gotta do something different. So, like, these are hard things to sit with, and both sides are true. Both sides are absolutely true. So it's not cognitive dissonance, it's not that like I'm ignoring a part of the picture. It's that I'm actually gonna be in full relationship with the whole picture.
But it could start in cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely.
That could, right.
Yes. So we wanna come into contact with the whole thing. Okay, any other what is DBT in a nutshell? So I just wanna say at this point of the day that DBT is a complex and nuanced treatment, and if you think it's like this, it's bigger than that. It's a complex and nuanced treatment with many, many, many moving parts to it.
Well said.
So, yeah, so on that note, there's much to talk about here, but there are 4 modes to treatment. And I find that DBT gets swallowed up in skills, which is really sad to me because it's only 1/4 the treatment model. There's individual therapy, which will often include a family component, it will often include parenting or the spouse. Yeah, and individual therapy doesn't have to be 40 minutes once a week. It could be twice a week, it could be 3 times a week, every other week, depends on the needs of the client. And it can be 90 minutes, especially if you're doing exposure work or trauma treatment within DBT. And individual therapy can also go through stages. We have stages in DBT. We've got stage 1 work, which is what we typically think of as DBT. We've got stage 2 work, where we tend to do either trauma work or emotional experiencing work. If I'm struggling with emotional regulation, I'm for sure also struggling with experiencing my emotions, so we're gonna get that in stage 2 work. Stage 3 is ordinary happiness and unhappiness, or garden variety, depression, anxiety, and relationship issues, adjustments. And stage 4 is peak spiritual experiencing and whatnot. So that's individual therapy. Then we've got skills group, which is what we're classically known for and very popular. And we've got phone coaching, and phone coaching can be for coaching for skills. It can be for navigating crisis, and it also can be for the relationship. That's one of the 3 functions of phone coaching. And the 4th mode of DBT is consultation team for the therapist, which is also a very important mode of treatment. And there's only 2 rules in DBT. What are the 2 rules, Anita? Oh, you all failed. The 2 rules in DBT are the 24-hour rule and the 4-miss rule. It's the only rules in DBT. There's no rules. People think DBT's got a lot of rules. It's very structured. There are no rules in DBT. It's a principle-based, not protocol-based treatment. There are no rules in DBT. There are 2, except 2. The 2 are the 24-hour rule, which is that after you self-harm or engage in a target behavior, you can't call for coaching. You can have a session, but you can't call for coaching for 24 hours. And the second is the 4-miss rule. If you miss 4 sessions in a row, you're out of DBT. There is no other way out of DBT. You cannot just leave. You're still in it, sorry. But if you miss 4, then you're out. So how did I get interested in this topic of like the interpersonal, the relationship? I mean, I care about relationships. I'm a therapist. Obviously, I want my clients to, obviously. It's not so obvious to some people, but obviously I want my clients to feel good in session. I want them to feel connected to me. I want them to feel comfortable being there. I want them to be able to use the space well. But I particularly got interested in this because I was working in an outpatient hospital setting using DBT, and we had a beeper system. So what we had is you had a beeper for a week. We would rotate through the team who was in charge of the beeper, and clients all had access to this beeper number, and they would call the beeper number, and then the therapist on call would call the client back and do phone coaching, which was really nice because then you had a bunch of weeks off.
Wow.
When you weren't on call. Now I found that this was really not, yeah.
Is this in America?
This is in America, yeah. My training was in America. This is the system the hospital allowed for. Okay, so sometimes you're working against the system you're working with the system that's got policies in place you've got to work with. And that is what you can do. You can't do better than that because that's what it is. And it was nice enough that they allowed us to even do this beeper system. They really had their own crisis call center, and they originally wanted our clients calling there. So we convinced them already to let us use this beeper system, so that was already an upgrade, okay? But the reason I had a problem with this is because I had clients who weren't comfortable calling. I had clients who would call, and the calls would be highly reinforcing, which is one of the important things of understanding how to do phone coaching, is how to use phone coaching in a way that is not reinforcing ineffective behavior, but rather is a way of reinforcing effective behavior, and that wasn't happening. And so it was, it was okay. It was certainly an upgrade from a crisis center, which is really not great for our easy clients. I remember during Corona, somebody opened a crisis call center. Many places are opening crisis call centers, and one of them asked me, like, we're getting these same people who are calling every day. And I was like, right, those are my clients. Good job, guys. And the other thing that got me really crazy about this topic is the oversimplification of DBT as a skills-based treatment. DBT is a very complex treatment that has skills in it. Skills is a huge thing. It's what we're known for, right? But it is and that is one part of the treatment. An important part because most of our clients have a significant skills deficit and will benefit from learning skills. And that's one part of the treatment. You ever meet a client who really knows skills and is still hyper dysregulated?
Yes.
Yeah, you ever meet clients who have all the skills and have been through 16 hospitalizations and they can teach you the skills themselves, but they are not well. They are in bed hospitals. So that is not the entire treatment. And if you think it's the entire treatment, and if you think that's the entire treatment, then that's really, really sad because then we didn't treat all these people, right? All these people didn't get better. But that's because the skills is only one part of what this person might be struggling with. They might be struggling with a skills deficit, but they're likely also struggling with several other problems. Skills deficit is one problem.
Right.
Okay? Most people are struggling with multiple problems if they've gotten to the point that they're coming for DBT. So skills can't be the whole thing. Hello? So it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole thing. It's not the whole thing. DBT is complicated treatment, and a big part of it is leveraging the relationship. So let's figure that out a little. Yeah?
Can you explain a little bit more what you said about the phone calls, that the coaching was more to reinforce the bad behaviors as opposed to...
Yeah. So not always, right? There are going to be clients who are going to call and are going to say, I'm really struggling. I'm so glad I finally have a DBT therapist. Can you help me? I really want to kill myself. And you're going to say, great, let's just get some ice and do some tip. And they're going to say, oh my gosh, I did tip and I feel so much better. Thanks so much. Click. And everything went well, and this client's going to be better in 3 months. They're probably like a 14-year-old who never had prior therapy, and it's going to be amazing for them, and I'm really happy for them. And for those people who are like new to therapy and like they really have a skills deficit, they're going to learn those skills, they're going to benefit from home coaching, and they're going to get better, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to feel good. So you've got to have some of those clients that are things like. But it's not going to help all the clients, because a lot of clients who are emotionally dysregulated are also going to struggle interpersonally. It's part of the diagnosis. The reason it's part of the diagnosis is not because there happens to be this mysterious illness called borderline personality disorder. No, when you have emotional dysregulation, you are going to struggle interpersonally because you are not going to be regulated enough to be personally effective, and you are going to get reinforced for ineffective behavior. For example, when we teach invalidation, childhood invalidation, or chronic invalidation from childhood as part of biosocial theory, when we teach that conceptually, we teach that somebody who is chronically invalidated consistently got reinforced for escalating behavior, escalating communication, rather than for clear and appropriate communication. So they said, I'm hungry, and mom said, no, you're not. They said, I'm sad, and dad said, get over it. They started crying, and mom said, suck it up, calm down, what's your problem, grow up, stop being such a baby. So this is not abuse in the classical sense, but this is going to give you a message of that doesn't work. Saying I'm sad, crying doesn't work to get your emotional needs met. What works? I'm suicidal tends to work, right? So it works to be inappropriate in your communication. So that's what's going to get, and then you go to a therapist, right? Finally go to a therapist, and the therapist says, call if you're in crisis. So when do I call? When I'm suicidal. When do I get additional therapist attention? When I'm suicidal. It's the same exact pattern continues to play. I don't mean to, but just the toddler doesn't need to have a meltdown because mom said no for the lollipop. But if every single time I melt down, you give me the lollipop, I'm going to keep melting down. It's not my fault. It's not anybody's fault. We are all subject to behavioral principles. So that's the basic gist of that. But we're going to talk more about it, hopefully.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, please.
You said kind of almost stamping your foot. We also do therapy, right? So what do you do when you do therapy?
What do I do when I do therapy?
Yeah.
Well, lots of things, depends on the client needs. But when I'm doing individual DBT, individual DBT is more or less for stage 1 DBT, which is what we classically think of as DBT. Client comes in with a diary card. I'm looking at the diary card, and the diary card is setting the agenda for the session based around 4 targets, primary treatment targets in stage 1 DBT, which are life-interfering behavior, treatment-interfering behavior, quality of life-interfering behavior, and skills enhancement, building skills. That's what's happening in every single session. I'm looking at the diary card, I'm looking at the tiered hierarchy and picking something to target for the session, and then I'm doing a chain analysis every session to build insight, and then to do an intervention. So I'm going to do an intervention that's based on what the client is struggling with, based on their treatment targets. So So you come to me, you want to work on self-harm first, but we can work on other things also. Work on self-harm first, we're going to work on self-harm. And we're going to understand when it happens and exactly why we're going to do intervention about it every single session. I'm not going to talk about your boyfriend.
And what do you say if the client says, no, I'm not looking at my diary card with you?
Then they're not doing DBT. Then we can go back to stage 0, which is pre-treatment, orientation, and commitment. We talk about whether you want to be here or not, which is totally fine. You don't have to be here. Okay, the therapeutic relationship. How do we know that DBT prioritizes a therapeutic relationship? Maybe I made it up. Maybe like I'm making up this other therapy that doesn't really exist, and DBT really is all about skills. So, first of all, the treatment relationship is a real relationship between equals. That is a DBT therapist agreement. Okay, that's part of what we read in the text, or the Bible, or the Red Book. If you don't know what that is, Google it. That's the CBT for Burnout Time disorder. That is called the text, or something like the Bible, or the Red Book is the big DBT book, original DBT text. So a genuine relationship between two human beings who are equally subject to the principles of behaviorism. That's the definition of that. So real relationship between equals. What you need, no, it's not. I'm a therapist or a client. There's a power dynamic. There is. Yes, there is. It's all true. I'm not trying to lie or pretend that's not true. What I am saying is that it's a genuine relationship between two human beings who are equally subject to the principles of behaviorism. I am subject to the principles of behaviorism just like my clients are. And this topic is discussed at length in the text. Reducing burnout is a central goal of the consultation team, right? What do we have consultation team for? Basically 2 things, adherence to treatment and burnout.
Right.
That's why we have the consult team. It's literally a fork of the treatment is don't burn out. Don't burn out. Care about your clients. Stay motivated. Repairing the relationship is a central goal of phone coaching, right? Got just a couple goals of phone coaching, and one of them is to repair the relationship. And therapy interfering behavior is the second target. Remember I said in stage 1 treatment, what are we targeting? We're targeting life interfering behavior. If the client's dead, they're not getting treatment, right? We've got a goal here, which is give the client DBT. If they're dead, they're not getting DBT. If there's therapy interfering behavior, not getting DBT. So that's our second target, is to make sure that they're getting therapy. And very often, the relationship stuff is the therapy interfering behavior. These are some quotes from the big book, the Red Book, or from different research articles. I wanted to include the citations, and then I was like, slides, we won't read all that. So ask me after if you want the actual citations. Okay. In those cases where the experience of being cared for, and shall I say also, this is by Marshall and Han in a 2010 text on phone coaching. In those cases where the experience of being cared for, and shall I say also being loved in some way by the therapist is a critical component of the therapeutic relationship, being told that there are arbitrary limits on that care can be exceptionally painful. So for suicidal clients, for sure, for other clients as well, for suicidal clients, being told there are arbitrary limits on the extent of the care is a critical aspect of treatment. And that's a critical aspect of treatment, is that you are protected from me and I am bad or I'm a burden on you or whatever. When working with individuals who often make others want to attack instead of help, one of the critical tasks of a DBT therapist is to teach clients how to get others to actually want to help and even want to talk on the phone. That is one of the critical tasks of treatment, is to get the client to want to talk to you and to get you as a therapist to want to talk back to them. Does that make sense why that's such a critical component of treatment, of DBT treatment?
Yeah.
It's a huge component of treatment, is that we actually want to talk to each other.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. I, as the therapist, do not want to talk to somebody who's being critical of me, who's being nasty to me, who's threatening me. I don't want to talk to a person like that. I'm going to dread that call. If I can get my client to a place where I enjoy when they call, because I know it's going to be effective, and I know it's going to move them in treatment, I know I'm going to feel motivated and energized after, that's where we want to get our clients. Our DBT clients, that's where we want to get them to.
Right.
We want to get them to a place where they're, we'll talk about it, but it's basically about observing and communicating limits in a nutshell. How do we get them there? How do we get them there is more or less through observing and communicating limits, which is why I hold is much more important than interpersonal effectiveness skills we teach in the skills group. The more DBT supervision can aid therapists to think their patients actually like them. This was a research trial where they studied this. So cool. The more DBT supervision can aid therapists to think their patients actually like them, the more effective the therapist will be in reducing suicidal behavior, meaning we have evidence to show that we will reduce suicidal behavior if therapists like their clients more.
Right.
Wow. Therapeutic strategies foster a more favorable therapeutic relationship. Yeah.
If therapists think their patients like them, not if they like their patients. Both directions. Either way, it's
So if their
interesting.
patients like them, think their patients like them.
interesting.
But let's read the next one, because I think it's going. Therapeutic strategies fostering a more favorable therapeutic relationship. So yeah, well, this relationship in general, were associated with a drop in suicidal behavior in women with borderline personality disorder and a history of repeated suicidal behavior. So that was pretty cool paper. Validation functions to create a positive, attached therapeutic relationship. I think it does say the word attached in a paper by Marsha. A central procedure in DBT is to develop a positive relationship and then use that relationship to reinforce progress. That is a central procedure in DBT. That's from the big book, in the red book. That is a central procedure in DBT. More than TIP, which is also a central procedure. Okay, observing limits. So observing limits, yeah.
So you're saying, we're going to have those like difficult patients who are harsh and critical. How do we get them to a place where they're actually likable? That's what you're saying.
Well, that's our job. All I've said so far is trying to convince you that DBT actually cares a ton about that.
Okay.
So let's go now to like some of the strategies, because it's complex. Remember I started off by saying like DBT is complicated? So it's really complicated, and I can't answer on one foot because there's not one. It's not like we teach a skill and this is the skill. It's actually all the therapeutic strategies and all the dialectical strategies and all the skills we're teaching combined with the process of phone coaching. Like I believe phone coaching and individual therapy are critical components of developing this, more important than skills. Much more important than skills for interpersonal skill is the dynamic between the therapist and client that happens through the individual therapy and the phone coaching.
Right. Are you like reflecting back to the patient?
So what are you doing in session is your question.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're doing, in my opinion, like this is like the critical thing, like there's other things that are happening also, but like a reverence is happening. It's a stylistic strategy that's helpful in communicating to clients to get them to be more like honest, reflective, and like move with you instead of being stuck. So like that's one strategy that therapists might use to help maintain movement speed and flow in the treatment, okay? Like that's helpful. But when I'm talking like how do we actually, so there's too many strategies. I'm not gonna be able to teach you right now what all the strategies are. But the main point, the main thing that teaches this is observing and communicating limits. And I'll talk about now. So
The therapist limits.
it goes both ways.
Okay.
But we teach clients the process of observing and communicating limits by me as the therapist observing and communicating limits, and teaching my client to do the same thing. That's really, like, to me, the main gist, more or less, of how we teach interpersonal effectiveness in DBT. So, okay, we've got this job in DBT to give clients what they need without burning out the therapist, okay? So it's like that line I got from an article on like the history and development of DBT. And part of the development of DBT was how do we get therapists who traditionally burn out with this population, how do we get them to stop burn out and actually do the treatment? So we've got this main task to give clients what they need without burning out the therapist.
Right.
How do we do that? We observe, one way we observe rather than set limits. When we set limits, my hours are 9 to 5. Or I can even have bigger limits. I can set limits like, I take off till 10. But that is setting a limit rather than observing a limit. Observing a limit means that my limits are different than your limits. My limits today are different than they were 6 months ago. Right? This guy wasn't here 6 months ago, so my limits were very different then. And in 6 months, he's going to be much bigger and not nap as much, so my limits are going to shift. And if I can communicate that appropriately and effectively with my clients, I can teach them how to be in a relationship where a person has limits that are not about you and that are not about the relationship. I care about you, and I go to sleep sometimes. And that helps me to not be snappy at you tomorrow in our session. So this is all good news, right? None of this means that I'm rejecting you or abandoning you or don't care that you're not there enough, and all the stuff that clients complain about that we don't have an answer for. You know I care about you. You know it. You know it. And I'm still saying, this isn't going to work for me right now. And I can stretch it sometimes. You're going through a really hard time, and I know that, and I'm going to stay up a little bit later tonight because I know you're going through a hard time. That is so, wow, big deal. Oh, there's more on this slide. We also want to teach clients to observe their own limits. And then, okay, in DBT consult team, we read some DBT therapist agreements. One of them is the observing limits agreement. The team agrees that all members are to observe their own personal and professional limits. I thought the text would be useful just to like see how DBT is talking about this so fine-tunedly. Furthermore, team members agree not to judge limits different from their own as too narrow or too broad, and instead determine if the limits are effective in a given situation. The team may suggest that a member broaden or narrow limits to become more effective, and at the same time will accept each other's differing limits without judgment. Team members will do their best to communicate their limits effectively to clients and teammates, and at the same time, clients are expected to ask about, learn, and accept providers' limits. We're teaching this through our behavior, through individual therapy, and through phone coaching. This is critical. Okay, burnout. Burnout prevents DBT from happening. It's not just about, it's not nice to the therapist, it's that a burnt out therapist is not a good therapist. I don't want a burnt out therapist, right? So it's part of the second target of stage 1 treatment. The second target in treatment is to not burn your therapist out. If you're burning your therapist out, you're not getting good therapy. That is treatment different behavior. Right. If you come 5 minutes late every time and then yell at her when she ends on time, that is therapy different behavior, and it's going to burn your therapist out, and you won't have a good therapist. So how do we avoid it? We observe and communicate limits. That's the most important thing. Sorry for all the quotes. I just saw so much good stuff, and the reason I wanted to quote it is I wanted you to see it's not me. I'm not making this up. DBT really holds this. It's not me. There's a lot of good stuff out there. DBT is a complex and nuanced treatment. An important goal of DBT is to teach the patient to act in such a manner that the therapist not only can give the help that the patient needs, but also wants to do so. Like, we want happy, motivated therapists. Yeah.
I can imagine that when you're explaining this to a client, you don't use the word burnout, because I don't know, I feel like if I was a client and my therapist said to me, well, you know, I'm worried that you're going to burn me out, I'd be like, that's
your problem. Be a professional. Yeah.
Like,
so I don't say in those
professional,
words. I mean, I might say in those words if I've known the client a long time, or if they've said to me, like, I burned out a lot of prior therapists. Right. So if they've used, I might use that word. It's not like I've never used that word, but I would usually say something like, you want a happy therapist who's happy to see you, who wants to help you, who's not too tired or cranky or annoyed from how you treated me on the phone yesterday.
I just feel like it's dangerous because then it's putting it on them. It's putting it on them, and it's like,
But part of it is on them.
I'm just like, I could just imagine, like, as a client, like, that would worry me. Like, it's in my hands.
Yeah, look, I'm responsible for you. I'm paying you. You be responsible for yourself. Deal with yourself. You have to be the professional in the room, right? And that's when we have an entire profession of very professional therapists who are not real people with their clients, which is fine, and it works with some clients. It works with a majority of clients. It doesn't work with the borderline clients. And even if they're telling you how you have to take care of yourself, how could you treat me this way? I'm not responsible for your emotions. Take care of your own emotions yourself. Maybe you should go to a DBT skills group, right? Right. So when they're saying that, what they're actually saying is, can I trust you?
Right.
Am I responsible for? I'm going to upset you. Then you say it real. You say it real. Yeah, there is a problem here, which is that you might burn me out. You might make me a really annoyed therapist, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that doesn't happen. And I've got a lot of systems in place to make sure it doesn't happen. And I'm responsible for myself. You're right, but you're also responsible for yourself. And this is an interaction. And that's part of dialectical philosophy. That change is transactional, and that we cannot separate ourselves from the principles of behaviorism, and we can't separate ourselves from interacting with each other, transacting on each other. Right? We are in a dynamic. Right now, I'm looking at you, you're blinking a lot, right? I'm thinking, maybe she's not even listening to what I'm saying, maybe no one else is this topic, I don't know what that, right? There is a transaction that's happening. You cannot make that not happen, okay? So in every therapeutic relationship, there is a dynamic happening. And if you're the therapist who's very professional, and has your specific hours, and you know, and the client knows what to expect, and it's very safe and cleaner because you know what to expect, there's value to that. I'm not trying to like put down the therapist who does that, but there's also danger to it, which is that there's not a genuine relationship, there's not a back and forth, right? And then you have the therapist is going to get mad at some point at some client. They're going to want to know you, and you're really stuck. Yeah.
When does it?
Because then it's all the client's fault. Sorry. The reason we're going to get. I have an anger slide. Yeah.
At what point does this incentivize the clients from reaching out and from actually sharing?
That's it. So if I had a client who was distance, what is the word?
That's a good one.
I don't know. Is that the right word?
I'm not sure.
Disincentive. I don't know what the right word is. Disincentivized. We'll go with it because I don't know what If we have a client who's not incentivized to call their client, to call their therapist because they keep burning their therapist out, that's a therapeutic That's a therapy interfering behavior. So I'm gonna have to spend time in session, chain analysis on the last time that happened, so I can understand what's going on, so we can make sure that we can shift that dynamic, because I need you to learn how to do this with me, even though I'm a little annoyed, right? We're gonna have to figure this out, because if you don't learn this, so this is where I talk about rupture and repair. That's a rupture.
Right.
That's a rupture, but we're gonna repair it. We are gonna repair it. Not gonna let it go. Yeah, and use your consult team. Okay, that was what I said about burnout. Sorry, I have more to say about burnout. How we can be responsible for burnout. How can you make me responsible for my burnout? My clients are crazy, it's not my fault. She's so mean. Assumptions about therapists, staff, clients from DBT orientation, we already say, we say, in DBT orientation, we say that there is assumptions about clients that people cannot fail in DBT. That's one of our assumptions in DBT, is that clients cannot fail in DBT, and treatment providers can fail. How obnoxious is that? But that has to do with our responsibility as therapists to do something about our burnout. That we can be responsible for our burnout, even if we have way too many clients who are way too whatever right now. So burnout is our responsibility. DBT approaches non-therapeutic responses to patients as indications that there are problems in the therapeutic relationship. That is, therapy interfering behaviors are going on. Meaning, if I'm doing something that's non-therapeutic in response to my client, it's because that is a therapy interfering behavior. It's not because I'm a bad therapist, I just came out of the dust and just was bad. It's because there's something that's going on here that I can take responsibility for and that I can shift. Okay, observing and communicating limits is our responsibility, and it is the way to decrease or limit burnout. Okay, this is a little complicated, so bear with me. Give me a time check. Okay, should we skip this? Let's skip that and we'll come back if we've got time. It's really interesting, but it's gonna take me time. So what do we do when we get angry with clients? So here's just 2 thoughts on it. There could be more reasons, but 2 thoughts that have come up in supervision with therapists, real live therapists, meaning this was the anger for the specific therapist. Anger, for example, can be a secondary emotion to ineffective guilt. So ineffective guilt, guilt is an emotion that shows up, as we know from DBT, when we've done something against our morals or values. Ineffective guilt is when we have not done something against our morals and values, and we feel guilty anyway. Now, if I feel ineffective guilt, I might get angry because I shouldn't have to feel this way. Anger is an emotion that I shouldn't have to feel this way, experience this way, etc. Anger is a shouldn't or a should emotion. So I feel guilty for doing a bad job, for not meeting their needs, for not having as hard of a life as them. I had a client say, the client was saying that. For not adequately validating, for not treating them properly, for not having as hard of a life was the client kept saying that to the therapist. You don't have as hard a life as me. How can you treat me better? How can you validate me? For not adequately validating, for not treating them properly, for ending session, for ending phone calls. So is any of those behaviors wrong? Was the therapist wrong in any of these situations? Should they apologize and change their behavior? No, there are reasons they have to do these things in every situation. So we didn't do anything wrong, and when we feel ineffective guilt, we get angry. They shouldn't make me feel this way. So if you can release the guilt, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm doing the best thing I can for this client. I'm going to keep on trying to do better. I'm doing the best thing I can for this client, and it makes sense that they're going to get upset sometimes. And then the anger can come down. So that's my responsibility to take care of. Not, well, they're driving me nuts. They're just super difficult, I just need some self-care. Reduce my caseload. It's not about that. It's about, can I release this difficult, painful emotion because it's coming from an ineffective place. Okay, angry could also be non-acceptance of the treatment process. So sometimes the client is really still unwilling. They shouldn't be like this anymore. We dealt with this already. I've told them this 700 times, okay? We did this chain analysis over and over and over again. It's the same thing. I have nothing new to say to them. And I'm mad at them for not being better. That makes no sense. Sorry. So since it makes no sense, we're going to accept that clients are where they are. And sometimes they need to hear things 700 times and you do the same procedure, intervention over and over and over again. That's okay. I might need to do a little dancing into stage 0, which is pre-treatment orientation, commitment stuff. Maybe we need to recommit. Maybe we're not fully committed to treatment. Maybe we're not fully willing. That's okay. I can be there. I can be willing with you in stage 0. So those are some ways to release unhelpful anger. Leveraging the relationship. So this is critical in DBT, what I was saying from the beginning. DBT really, really cares about using the relationship. So first of all, contingency management. What's contingency management is one of our, I always forget this, 4. There's 4 main interventions we've got in DBT. Time modification, exposure, skills, contingency management. I never did all that. I always forget that. So contingency management is one of our primary interventions in DBT. I hope you caught that. In DBT, when I was explaining before, we do in stage 1 DBT. There are 4 things we do. Right, we looked at the diary card, we chose a target, we're doing a chain analysis, we've got 4 potential interventions we're going to use. 1 is cognitive modification, 1 is exposure, 1 is skills building, and 1 is contingency management. So contingency management is about managing the contingencies in a person's environment. So every time I cry and fall apart, my husband comes and takes care of me, and when I'm not falling apart and crying, he is being so mean to me and invalidating. So yeah, so we're gonna work with the husband to stop that behavior. But I, as a therapist, can be leveraged as an excellent contingency management tool. For example, call me once a week with good news. That's a great thing to do, right? It's gonna be really pretty reinforcing that. Or, if you call and scream, I will hang up. Or, if you get on the session and start screaming, I'm going to turn my chair around. Yeah. So I'm using myself I'm leveraging myself. That was only the first bullet. Teaching, observing, and communicating and respecting limits is like, achi, in my opinion. Like, this is what you gotta do. This is like the whole work. And you can teach important interpersonal skills such as how to ask for help effectively, trusting fallible people. We are fallible therapists. Welcome to being a person. So teaching them to trust us as fallible people, not as perfect professionals,
Right.
as very fallible people. That can be a very useful interpersonal skill.
Right.
Allowing oneself to be cared for. I can't be cared for because I'm bad, but now I'm actually being cared for and it's kind of safe and they're not rejecting me even though they know about my badness. That's pretty cool. And how to communicate distress. Can I communicate distress effectively and not be reinforced only for ineffective communication? So this is all like pretty cool stuff we can do by leveraging our relationship with clients. Effective phone coaching is a huge way of building the relationship because you're teaching clients how to reach out for help appropriately. I was going to say that. You're teaching them to respect limits, and you're actually providing opportunities for repairing ruptures. Waiting a week, if they see you only once a week, waiting a week to repair a rupture in a relationship is arbitrary punishment, says Marshall. And I stand by that. It is arbitrary punishment. So let them call you, repair the rupture. So let's sit with that. So target hierarchy in effect in a phone coaching is number 1 to decrease. So meaning people think phone coaching is about skills only. It's not. It's decrease suicidal or non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. Then increase generalization of behavioral skills. Decrease the sense of alienation between client and therapist, and share good news are all nice targets for phone coaching. So yeah, through that we can teach asking for help effectively, we can teach respecting limits, and we can repair ruptures, which like is the gold in my opinion. Oh, that's why I made sparklies over here because it's like magical.
I like the comment. I feel like a nuance that might answer what you were saying is that it's understanding that it's not that my feelings are your responsibility, but know that we influence each other, and being able to like hold that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was like implied, and I was really supposed
So yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
That's good.
Oh my gosh, now I feel so extra. Oh, it's so
I think
nothing good.
that's not that my emotions are your responsibility, and we influence each other,
Yes.
and that's a dialectic.
Yes, I have to learn to hold as a client in therapy struggling with interpersonal blah because of my emotional regulation. That I transact with people, I influence people. My behavior influences other people, and if I scream at somebody, they are not going to feel good. Yeah.
Can the broadness of the different uses of coaching skills be confusing for clients, or
So
Or for the
yes,
therapist, if it's like you called with good news, and like to me that's not good news, or worth my time on my, free evening, like how.
oh, it's so worth it. It's always worth it to hear good news.
Yeah.
It's like so worth it.
I guess the question with this
yeah.
population with boundaries
Yeah.
being confusing and that
Yeah.
being a broader list, how does that work
So
out?
there's actually some really interesting research on the topic because therapists are so terrified. And so in this 2010 little paper introduction to a series on phone coaching stuff from Marshall and writes, she said she was at like this conference years before, and she started talking with a psychoanalyst, started talking with a psychiatrist, started talking with another psychiatrist who all treated suicidal clients. They all took out of hours of contact. They had clients up at their door. They all took out of session contact. You cannot work with suicidal clients and not take out of session contact.
Right.
And today's therapists think they can work with suicidal clients and not out of contact. It's not going to work. First of all, that. Second of all, it just works. It just works. Like, you should feel rewarded. You should feel good. So, well, my opinion is, my personal opinion is, there's good research on that most clients are not going to call. Most clients are going to undercall rather than overcall. And we do orient clients. You do need to orient your clients to how phone coaching works. But yes, then they will either not use it enough or use it inappropriately. And that's where the magic happens. Then you observe and communicate limits, and then they learn. Because if you give them the arbitrary boundaries, which so many treatments are so, not treatments even, like so many providers want to give the arbitrary boundaries because it makes us feel a little more secure and not vulnerable to our crazy clients, right? So because they're working with some really complex cases sometimes, we don't want to be vulnerable, right? But be vulnerable.
It's more of a means of observing the limits, like
Using what it is to stand upon it, not just what it is inside.
Yes, meaning we're not telling clients these are the rules. We're not telling the rules. It's very scary. We're going to go into rules. So you can really mess up. So it's scary. It's very scary for both the therapist and the client. But we're willing to engage in this together. This is every relationship. Every relationship is scary because it doesn't come along with a set of rules.
And it's in the relationship, you know what I mean, like that ends up, and when it's happening, you're like, whoa, like, because I asked that same question, but then when you're working with people, then you're like, okay, it just somehow magically unfolds, yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about ruptures because we're out of time. But ruptures are magical. Ruptures are painful and unpleasant and really gross. But they contain all the magic because when you repair a rupture, you provide what other modalities might call like reparenting or what's the other term? Like, a corrective experience, right? Like things like that. So, but what I'm going to say here is, behaviorally speaking, you're providing an opportunity for new learning to happen. You can actually I can go on maternity leave, like nobody's business. And like, it's not about you. And it's still not about you, and it's still not about you, and it's still not about you. Whoa! But that never happened to me. Every goodbye I had in the past, a client might say, or several clients might say, was about abandonment and rejection. I never had somebody who cares about me and is sad to pause the relationship or to end the relationship. I am sad when my clients graduate, as I'm so happy for them. And I want them to graduate, and I want them to leave me, and I'm going to miss them. And I can own that, and that's beautiful for them to understand. So ruptures and repair are like magical. The task of repairing disruptions and tears in the fabric of the relationship can be one of the most therapeutic processes the patient experiences. More than skills! Certainly, the necessity to repair relationships is typical in the patient's life. The repair in this case, however, can prove extraordinarily healing. They need to do this with other people. So hello, do it with you. This is a beautiful example, so we'll end on this. If you want to hear about dialectical dilemmas, see me after. Feeling safe in the relationship. This is a classic example I see with clients, feeling safe in the relationship. So clients sometimes sabotage relationships in order to protect themselves from getting hurt.
Right.
Sound familiar? Through the therapeutic relationship, which is a great place to experiment because mistakes don't have the same consequences with you as they do with real people in their lives. Like you can they can mess up with you and you can kind of catch them, right? Clients can learn to trust the relationship even though I'm not going to give you all the safety nets that you're asking me to. Like, tell me how old you are. Tell me how much experience you have. Tell me if you've treated this exact issue before. Tell me if you can handle me if I tell you X, Y, Z. Okay, so I'm not going to give you all your safety nets, and you can still trust me. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm going to answer every call. I'm going to miss your call. I'm going to take a shower and not take my phone to check me out. I won't always share personal things with you that you want to know. You're going to ask me a question, and I'm going to say, I don't want to answer that. And you can still go on with the therapy relationship. I won't necessarily give you preferential treatment. So clients sometimes will ask, like, clients sometimes want you to go overtime or to answer their calls that aren't appropriate for phone coaching. Because they're trying to see, do you really care? You're saying you care. If you care, then you want to give me preferential treatment. They don't mean to say that, but that's what they're saying. And if you don't do that, you still care about me. You can end on time and still care about me. Even with those clients who like the doorknob comments, they're testing that, and you can fail. You can fail to get the doorknob test. Even without these things, you can still know I care and trust the relationship to give you what you need from therapy. Actually, getting these things messes up your goals for therapy by making me less effective. Why would you want to do that? Right? So don't do that, and let's instead trust the relationship, even though I'm not doing these things. So takeaways, DBT is a treatment that prioritizes the therapeutic relationship as a key mechanism of change of DBT. Individual therapy, right? Skills coaching, skills training is the mechanism of change there is teaching skills. There's a skills deficit, we're teaching skills. But the relationship is also a key mechanism of change in DBT for the interpersonal side of things, which tends to be a quite significant side of things. Individual therapy is a place for rupture and repair, observing and communicating limits, and practicing effective communication. That's what happens in individual therapy. Phone coaching provides space for using and navigating the real relationship in the client's actual life. Consultation team assists the therapist in reducing likelihood of burnout. Leveraging the relationship is critical for client success in DBT. Ta-da! The end. Your questions, comments, concerns, unresolved inner conflicts. We'd be happy to help. Yeah.
So in answer to my question earlier, it's more like a lot of just explaining and telling them that you care despite that you're spending.
It's not just saying you care. Clients can tell if you care for a second. So they can tell you care because you demonstrate your care, because you take them seriously. You validate their experiences. You show up to actually provide them with like a response that's valid for what they're bringing to you. I've got a real problem. I've got a real solution, or I'm going to find one. So they learn that you care very quickly if you take them seriously. And you take their problem seriously. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you go back to the slide that we missed?
Yes, sure. I can go back to the slide we missed. Here. So we can end here, and then people could also ask questions. Yeah. So this is the idea of dialectical dilemmas, one of my most favorite. Dialectical dilemmas is active passivity versus apparent competence, which is resolved with effective or appropriate communication. Or accurate expression, what did I say? Accurate expression. Accurate expression. And this is complicated. Should I just explain it? Or someone awkwardly feels like they can't read it. You're all trapped. Okay, so active passivity, for example, like active passivity can show up in many ways. Active passivity is the side of the coin where the client is like I always think from my original DBT trainer gave the example of the client like came to the session apparently confident. Everything's great week, they're using the skills, everything's going well, they're having some all is good. And then the therapist had a few more clients. And they go to the parking lot to their car and the client's sitting under their car tires. So that's active passivity, right? You now have to, right, rally the troops. I always think with active passivity, rally the troops. Fix me. Everybody come and fix me. So I'm a wreck. I still want to kill myself. I'm not better yet. Nothing works. That's like I'm actively passive, right? Like nothing helps. Fix it. The typical response, like that a therapist gets mad about, like I'm a great therapist and you're just crazy, defensive, or resisting. Heard that before? So meaning you need to be a better client. That's what it's meaning. When clients communicate with active passivity, they're telling the therapist to be mad about it, right? That they're not doing a good enough job. Like that's what they end up pulling for. Laying on the floor in front of you, you use wasted the whole session. What's your problem? Parent competence, you're a terrible therapist because you didn't make me do my diary card and you said you would because you missed my phone call. Because you missed my phone call because you came late because you we're drinking. So, because we were distracted. We were totally distracted. We were thinking about it. Typical response, I can't handle this client. I'm burned out. I need to fire them. I need boundaries. I guess we're over. I need boundaries, meaning I'm not a good enough therapist for them. The therapist then feels it. I'm not a good enough therapist for them. That's what apparent competence pulls for. Accurate expression, I'm still struggling and I'm worried about getting better. That's what the client in accurate expression says. And the accurate expression therapist says, we have every reason to believe this is working. Let's assume. And will work as long as we're doing the treatment. Thanks for pointing out my mistakes. I'll keep making those because I'm fallible. So it helps me call it out and work together to get back to treatment. So I own if I made a mistake. I'm going to stop doing that. It's going to keep happening, so keep calling me out on it. And we're doing okay. Therapy's not working. Like, we have every reason to believe this is working. So that's the accurate response. I hope that was just a helpful way of pointing out how our DBT clients can polarize on either side of the dialectic and polarize us on either side of the dialectic in their communication, and how we can get to accurate expression, both for us and the client. Okay. Second ending. Thank you.